Hello, friends! Welcome to the 13th episode, the very first episode of 2024 of the Schoolyard Podcast, brought to you by School Specialty. I'm your host, Nancy Chung, a fun-loving teacher and content creator, also known as Fancy Nancy in Fifth on social media, and I'm thrilled that you're here. A special shout out to School Specialty, who offers essential educational supplies and complete learning environment solutions to help you transform more than classrooms. School Specialty is excited to introduce Schoolyard Connect, a new site where educators can go to find helpful resources, including blogs, webinars, case studies, sample lesson plans, and more. Go to the site that's made for educators like you. schoolspecialty.com/schoolyard-connect. This is the Schoolyard Podcast, a podcast by educators for educators where the magic of learning unfolds. Instilling the love of reading and math at a young age lays the foundation for a lifetime of learning and intellectual growth. Reading opens doors to vast realms of knowledge, sparking imagination and fostering critical thinking skills. Children who develop a love for reading early on are more likely to excel academically and become lifelong learners. Similarly, cultivating an early appreciation for math not only enhances cognitive abilities, but also instills problem-solving skills essential for everyday life. The combination of reading and math proficiency equips individuals with a well-rounded skill set, empowering them to navigate an increasingly complex and information-driven world. Beyond academic success, the love of reading and math nurtures curiosity, creativity, and a resilience to challenges, preparing young minds to thrive in diverse fields and contribute meaningfully to society. The question is, how do we spark that love of reading and math? For this episode, we're in Houston, Texas at the Extra Yard for Teachers Summit, and I have two amazing guests here who will discuss the love of literacy and numeracy. Our first guest, Juan Edgar Gonzalez Jr., also known as Mr. G, is an elementary school teacher from Houston, Texas. He's well known and well loved for his love of literacy. Juan is one of the main speakers at the biggest teacher conference in the nation and uses his social media at Teaching Third with Mr. G to connect with teachers all over the world. His mission through this work is to spotlight the great work all educators are doing in classrooms and to inspire everyone to read more books. Our second guest, Rebecca Peterson, at Rebecca Peterson _, is a high school math teacher from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who just happens to be named the 2023 National Teacher of the Year. Yes, that's right. National Teacher of the Year. That means out of all the teachers who teach in the United States, she's recognized as the best of the best. As National Teacher of the Year, Rebecca plans to use her platform to highlight teacher stories of the good that's happening in education. Rebecca administers and has contributed 1,400 posts to the One Good Thing blog and credits daily postings on the blog to help her recognize the beautiful and positive experiences occurring in her classroom. Welcome to the Schoolyard, Juan and Rebecca.
Yay, we're excited to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
It is such an honor to have both of you here at the Extra Yard for Teacher Summit. The summit will begin in a few hours, so the team is setting up around us as we record in person. Our first in-person recording here at the Wortham Theater. You might hear some hustle and bustle in the background. Now, for those of you listening in who are not familiar, the annual Extra Yard for Teachers Summit, hosted by the College Football Playoff Foundation, is a free celebration open to all educators and is an extraordinary opportunity to fuel passion for teaching and leading, gain new insights, and letting others celebrate you and your remarkable contribution to education. In addition to hearing from some amazing speakers, those in attendance will be walking away with some really cool swag bags from the sponsors. I know School Specialty is giving away a bunch of gift cards and, of course, Schoolyard Podcast t-shirts. All right, Juan and Rebecca, is this your first time at the summit?
This is my first time. How about you?
Same, first time.
Me too. Isn't that amazing? The venue is beautiful. Now, you two are truly the experts in literacy and numeracy. Have you always loved reading as a child, Juan?
Yeah, I always say that was a privilege of mine, is that coming into the classroom when I wanted to be a teacher, I was most excited about teaching literacy. And so I came in and I've always loved books. And I got to the classroom and I thought all the kids would love books, and we know that's not always the case.
Right.
And so for me, yes, it was always natural for me. It was innate. And I think that's what helps keep that passion alive when I'm in the classroom. What about you, Rebecca?
How about you, Rebecca? Have you always loved math?
I've always loved math. Reading came a lot more difficult to me. I'm an immigrant to the United States, so I was trying to learn how to read in a language that I didn't speak at home. But math was consistent. Math is math no matter what language.
And what's your primary language? What was your first language?
My best language is now English, but my first language was Swedish. My mom is Swedish and my dad's Iranian.
Okay. Okay. I kind of have a similar experience. I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 10 in 5th grade. I didn't speak a word of English. I think I just knew hi and thank you. That was it.
Thank you. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So reading was such a challenge for me. And to make things worse, like my mom and sister are avid readers. And so they would force these books on me that were like way above my reading level that I didn't find interesting. And so I feel like that just sucked the love of reading out. And to make things worse, my mom used to make me like write book reports or book summaries. I'm like, oh my gosh. Right. So math was my kind of like my go-to subject as well. Yeah. Well, so for students like myself, and maybe a young reader, how do you instill the love of reading or math in your students when they're a little reluctant or scared of math, scared of reading? Can we start with you, Rebecca?
Yeah, so for mathematics, for numeracy, I think it starts with us as teachers, right? Like, it's so important that I have that passion and that love for math. And I think it's also so important as teachers that we see that we really broaden our definition of mathematics, that it's not about rote memorization or memorizing some formulas, that mathematics is all around us, right? And so it is recognizing that we all do math every day, and recognizing how our students view the world and how they view math, and affirming that in them and helping them to broaden their perspective on math as well.
How about you, Juan?
Definitely. And so I think when it comes to finding a love for it and meeting these students who are reluctant in math or in literacy, I always think of it as like if I was to invite you out to dinner and we say we're going to go have hamburgers, and then you say, well, I don't like hamburgers. Then I say, no, hamburgers are important. You need to like hamburgers, right? And then all of a sudden you get closed off. You start building the wall and you start thinking like, no, it's not for me. And all of a sudden we start building that part of their identity. And so what I've found is like really allowing students to find their identity in reading and in math. And so when they come to you and they tell you, I'm not a fan of literacy, you say, oh, yeah, I can see that. Let me show you why you can fall in love with it. And I think so many times because math and literacy are such a huge part of academia that it's so easy to just force it upon them, when instead meet them where they are and then show them what it could be.
That's an awesome analogy. I've never really thought about it that way. I'm always like trying to push like sushi on my friends who don't like sushi. I'm like, or reading, like, right? Like pushing reading or pushing math without offering any like anecdotes or like different strategies to like it. In your experience, how important is the role of parents or caregivers in nurturing a child's love for reading and math, having them become lifelong lovers of reading or math? Let's start with you, Juan.
Yeah, we know it's so important to have these conversations at home, but we also know we deal with students that come from all different backgrounds. And so if we put a lot of worth in hoping that we get the support from home, sometimes we are setting ourselves up for failure. And so as an educator, I like to think about what can we control in our schools, in our classroom, to really instill that love. And of course, when we have that extra support, we know it's beneficial, we know it helps them, but we also know, and in my experience, that's not always there. Everybody's dealing with different things, and so I think it's important as educators is that we think about that, because we can set up ourselves for failure to think like because these aren't happening, we can't be successful. And I think we can still be successful, and when we can get that support, that's just like a cherry on top.
During COVID too, right? Like we had some families who had so much support from their parents who made them read, or not made them read, but gave them books to read, and did like some extra math review with them. And some families who had nothing. Right? Okay. How about you, Rebecca?
Yeah, I ditto everything Juan said. But if there are parents listening, I do think that the way we talk about, I think particularly mathematics really matters, and I think there is a bit of a dichotomy because it's typically not socially acceptable as an adult to say like I don't really know how to read, you know, but it is pretty socially acceptable to be like I'm just not a math person, you know. And I think as adults, as parents, educators, the next generation is looking at us, right? And so how we talk about math really matters. My philosophy is that we are all math people, even if math class was not your cup of tea. Maybe we need to be looking at how we redefine math class so that math is a safe place for all our students. And so, yeah, I would push on us as adults to really be mindful about how we talk, particularly about math as a society, because it very much, what our children hear very much matters.
I mean, I feel like, you know, it's all about real life problems now, right? At the elementary level, we're always doing these like CGI math lessons or things that really take them like to like a deeper understanding of math. How is it like in high school? Like, do you guys do a lot of hands-on math, a lot of real life?
Well, I always say we high school teachers have a lot to learn from elementary teachers. You know, when I visit my, elementary classrooms, I'm like, look, stations. Why aren't we doing stations in high school? But yeah, so my favorite class to teach is calculus, and I love teaching calculus because it's really ubiquitous. Like anywhere you see a rate or an accumulation like that, it's calculus. And so getting to apply mathematics to what my students experience is really fulfilling, and they get to really kind of see like, you know, so that's why we had, like, I call them like the vegetables and the meat of like geometry, algebra, and trigonometry, right? And now like we get the dessert of calculus, but I would like.
I've never thought of calculus as a dessert, but
have you taken it? You know, it's just like a lovely sort of everything kind of comes to fruition with that course. But the thing is that not every kid has the opportunity to take that class, right? And so I think once again, we need to look at how we're structuring our pathways.
Well, that leads right into my next question, which is, can you share some examples of successful strategies or initiatives that foster genuine enthusiasm for learning? Can we start with you, Rebecca?
Yeah. So I think anytime I can bring in more collaboration with my students and more games, even teenagers, I love games. For one, it really fosters the sense of community, that we're like working together. The research shows that particularly adolescents have become worse at working independently post-pandemic. But I say, like, can we harness that, right? Like, so they like to work together, and that is a lifelong skill, right? So anything where they can collaborate, can communicate together, where I'm sort of taking myself out of the center and letting them work with their peers has been really successful. And games, like logic games, non-curricular games that take a little bit of time in the beginning, give us a little bit of a brain break, I find really help, and the research shows, like helps them store the content into their long-term memory then. And then I get to see different students shine, right? As you see like multiple different kinds of intelligences as we're playing different logic games or thinking games, or again non-curricular.
And you could tap into those strengths, right? When you
and then their peers see it too.
Right, exactly. What about you, Juan?
And for me, the biggest strategy is really, I think, like when I've talked to teachers, when it comes to reading, and especially like when we get to third grade, especially here in Texas, it's all about state assessment, right? And that's how we do reading. And so we're just looking at reading at an academic level, even in elementary, and we forget that we have to have these conversations about what does it mean to have a reading life. And so really allowing and showcasing my reading life. So when I check out a new book at the library, or when I purchase new books from my personal library or the classroom library, or when I'm in a reading run and I don't feel like reading, really showcasing those aspects of what it means to be a reader so that it feels more human to them instead of just a school thing. Because so many times when you're talking to young readers is that they think reading is a school thing. They don't associate it, they don't understand. And I tell them all the time, the video games you love, the on social media, the movies you watch, that's all storytelling. Those are books. And that's why we attach ourselves to those things, because we love stories. That from the beginning of time, human beings, we've always loved stories. And so that's what reading provides for us. And so I think changing the angle for what reading is and just really showcasing a reading life, I think is such a huge part that's missing in our reading instruction. And regardless of where the readers are, of course, we know that they need to learn how to read, right? But once we teach them how to read, what's the next level? Because I think a big focus, and it's so important, is how are we instructing them to read print, right? And that's so important. But after that, we can't always hope that they're going to naturally understand the process of why they want to be a reader. And so really juggling both. Where are they? What do they need to be, and benefiting them? But then once they're there, really showcasing what reading is outside of the academic world.
When you mentioned the books and the movies, it's so funny. Some of my students will find a book in my library and go, oh my gosh, there's a, because there's a book first and then the movie, right?
Sure.
But some of them think it's the other way around. They're like, they wrote a book from this movie? I'm like, no, it's the other way around. They had the book first and then they made the movie, and they're like,
precious.
Whoa. I know, I'm like, okay, maybe read it and see if, see how similar they are or how different they are, right? They love doing that. Okay, so do you have any tips on how educators can integrate technology and multimedia resources to enhance reading and math skills that still maintain a sense of joy and curiosity in the learning process? So, integrating technology and multimedia. What do you think, Juan?
And for me, reading, and I tell my readers this all the time, we know that, electronic readers exist, and if you're the type of reader who likes reading ebooks, go for it. And I tell them all the time, I like holding a book, and that's the type of reader I am.
The actual flipping of the pages.
Yeah, and so to kind of make that connection with just technology, I say I always read with my phone by my hand, because there are words that I don't know, or sometimes a fact that I learned that I want to learn more about. And so that's just kind of a way. We know phones exist with it's in everybody's hand all the time. So how does it exist when we're reading? And so kind of making that connection of seeing when I'm thinking and when I see a word I don't know, when I'm presented with a fact that I want to know more about, I make a note of it on my phone. And so it's a way of understanding of how I can bridge those two worlds. And because for me as a reader, I like reading print. And I think when it comes to reading and technology, those are too hard, for me at least, it's hard to combine without just going all electronic. For me, it's I still like print, but just kind of showing how both can coexist and how they can benefit the reading process is fun for me.
But we need both. So math, I'm like, I gotta see it. I need a pencil. So we know we learn by the hand, right?
Absolutely.
There's such a plethora of resources out there, and certainly, I think a lot of schools or districts, you have the technology that you're asked to use, need to use. But when I have the choice, I can come back to this question of is the technology going to connect me to my students more or less? Or is it going to connect me to our parents and guardians more or less? Because I think we know that technology can be it can be destructive as well, right? There's a point where it becomes too much and where it becomes a way to feel almost disconnected. And yet there are so many beautiful pieces of technology that I can't imagine teaching without. During the pandemic, I flipped my classroom. Yeah, and so I recorded and all my lessons, and my students now watch those lessons. They interact with the content at home, and then they come back in class and we collaboratively work on the assignment together. And I feel like I'm doing math with my students now instead of at them, Yes, and that was something I never would have tried without the pandemic, but also without technology, right? And so I feel like when you intersect technology with connection, you can have really powerful outcomes. Even just sending a survey of hey, tell me how your week is going, or what's one thing you want me to know. I find that students are a little bit more brave behind a screen, right? And so even if I ask the same thing written, sometimes they'll tell me a little bit more if they can type it behind a screen versus writing it on paper and pencil, which maybe sounds odd, but I don't know, I think we're all just a little bit braver. And so harnessing technology and harnessing our shared humanity, and looking for ways where technology can help us connect more, those are the types of resources that I search for. while also being cognizant that we just can't do all the things and learn all the platforms, you know?
Right.
Exactly, because there's, like you said, way too many.
There's so
out there.
many.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with what you said about how making sure that technology is connecting us to this experience, because it can be so isolating.
It can be so isolating. Yeah, I say a lot, like, I think we're past the COVID like COVID is still here, but I think the pandemic we've mostly said goodbye to, but I think our new pandemic is the pandemic of isolation.
Yes.
And
That's so true.
you know, and we see it plays a role in our communities, in our schools.
So as a teacher, I know among all three of us, we have many, many years of teaching. As a teacher, what was like a biggest mistake you made as a teacher? And what mistake will you never make again?
My first 2 years of teaching.
Restart.
The whole thing.
Only if you knew all the things that you know now back then. How scary, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us what you did.
We do everything wrong, and I think when I think back and I think about all the things that I did, I see all the mistakes, but I think the beauty of our work is that we're allowed to make mistakes because there's learning in making those mistakes. And so now looking back, even though there's a little bit of cringe to it or a little regret, but we also know that the learning process is filled with mistakes, and kids are so resilient, and we can make those mistakes and know that we can come back, and when we know better, we do better, and we can come back and say, hey, you know what, I think this is a better way to attack this, or let me show you a different way, because I think the first way that I did it wasn't really beneficial. And so I think while I'm still making mistakes, they're not as often as in the very beginning. I just think I've made many, and I have accepted them, and I don't know, and it's so hard too, because I could tell you, like, don't ever do this, but also in this work is that sometimes we know that 1 year it was really beneficial with the group of kids we're working with, and then another year it's not beneficial at all.
All the teachers listening right now are like, amen. Right?
And so I think, I've made plenty of mistakes, but as long as we are learning from them and we are moving forward, that's what's important. So if you're listening to this and you're in the year of mistakes, the month of mistakes, whatever, it's okay, because we've all been there.
Oh yeah, I couldn't have said that better. Yeah, 100%. I don't know, I made a lot of mistakes, but I think the biggest mindset shift that I don't want to go back to is my first 3 years of teaching were actually at the college level, and so coming in to a very large public high school, I thought I was like this sage on stage, like this dispenser of information, and I really much regret having that mind frame or that mindset. So shifting that to trying to remove myself from the center as much as possible, and trying to center my students. Again, it's not something I get right every day, but I feel like I'm getting closer to to making sure that, again, I'm not doing math at my kids, that I'm really doing the learning with them and alongside them, and that they feel like they're really invested and not just taking in the information, but actually learning and growing. I say that I'm really, my first few years, I felt like I was manufacturing solvers of X, and now I feel like I'm getting closer to fostering mathematical thinkers.
Wow.
That's perfect.
Steve, I know.
So well said.
No wonder she's the national teacher
exactly.
of the year.
So well said. And I think that not teaching at kids is so important. And then that takes me back to when I have to remind myself that learning is a bunch of small moments. When I think about all the things I know, it's not this one great lesson that the great teachers in my life that taught me. It's all the little moments in the classroom is what's benefiting the learning process.
Accumulation, which is calculus.
Look at that.
Dessert. No, for me, I think the biggest mistake, I thought I was being very rigorous. I thought I was being the best teacher. So I was just grading every single paper that came across my desk and just focus so much on the academics only. But we know that's not the right way to teach, right? So in my 27th year of teaching, I'm grading so much less, but that doesn't mean that my students are learning any less. They're learning so much more because I'm not I'm not buried under a pile,
you can breathe.
Piles of papers, and I'm building relationships, making the connections like you mentioned. Because I think when you have that deep connection with your students and they know that you care about them, then you can have them do anything
Yes,
you want, right?
yes.
Yeah.
You can get them to love reading,
Yeah,
try new books, and you can get them to love calculus.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
what you're saying reminds me, like when I first started teaching writing, I didn't understand what it meant to build a writer, so I only worked from what I knew. So when they showed me their piece of writing, I talked about conventions, I talked about spelling, and so now I know that when we're working with writers, someone once told me this, is that when we're asking our kids to write, they're like turtles without their shells, and so when they present their writing to us, and it's the first thing I'm saying. The first thing I'm saying is like, oh, this word's not okay. Look at your handwriting. Then they're building that wall, and they're not going to want to do the work. But when we are really fostering that love, and they build that connection with them, then we can get them to look at their writing and look at the convention piece. But if that's the first thing we attach and the first thing we talk about,
all those red marks on the paper, they're going to shut down and never want to write again. Yeah.
And so when you brought that up, that reminded me, like when I first taught writing, those were the first conversations I had with writers. And now I wait, because when that connection is there and the trust is there, then you can get them to do anything because they trust you in the things that you're coaching them for.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, as a student, I remember getting back papers with all these like red marks. I'm like, oh gosh, like I had such a fear of making mistakes.
Yes.
Fear of imperfection,
Yes.
And so that just kind of, so if I know that I'm not going to be amazing at something, like I don't do
wanna
it.
try.
I don't want to do
Yeah, of
it.
course.
I want to
Yeah,
stay away
yeah.
from it. So I can
Yeah.
understand where the kids are coming from.
Yeah.
But when we went to school, it was, I'm a lot older than you guys, but it was a lot, the mind shift, like the mindset was very different.
Very different.
Right? So conventions was like the first thing that you corrected, and right?
Yeah.
So even in math, when I first started teaching, correcting math quizzes or math tests were fast because it was you were either right or wrong.
Yep.
Now it's like grading an essay.
Right.
Because you have to think of, because they have to justify their
Correct.
reasoning and
Yes.
understand, like they have to, demonstrate their understanding.
Yes.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like
Yeah.
a novel.
Right.
But they get partial credit because it's the thinking process
Yes.
that we're rewarding and not
Yes.
just the writing. So,
Yes,
Right.
I think there's been a big shift to valuing our students' questions and mistakes, like knowing that mistakes are expected, right? And valued and corrected. And so I'm just coming back to the mistakes part. I don't know, something I really have shifted, instead of saying do you have any questions? I mean, what questions do you have for me? Or ask me 2 questions, right? Expecting those questions and making that part of our classroom culture.
So good.
Yeah. Well, what advice do you have for educators who want to create a positive and supportive learning environment that encourages curiosity and passion for both reading and math?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Rebecca said about how we bring the humanity back to the work that we do. And so that's how we make those connections. When we are just, like she said, teaching at them and we're talking about math and literacy, and this is sense of it's academics, this is what we do, this is, instead really bringing the human aspect of it is how we're going to see those connections and making them want to become readers, writers, mathematicians. So I think that's always in the back of my head when I'm looking at my lesson. Where's the human part of it, so that it feels very real to them.
Yeah, I think we have to be excited about the content too,
Yes.
right? I always say if I'm
kids
not
pick up on that.
if I'm not excited to teach this,
Yeah.
why would my students be excited to learn it?
It's so true.
You know?
Yes.
So bringing in ways that make it exciting for us to teach, it's palpable. Our students feel that, and I think, whatever that looks like for you. Again, for me, I love to see my students just having fun in the classroom, and so we do. We play a lot of games and bring kind of that joy back, and maybe a little bit of competitiveness too, right? Just making it fun, and even through the competition, making it a little less serious, you know? But I also come back to our English teachers are so good about when a student comes to them and they say I just don't really like reading. Your response is always, oh honey, we just haven't found you the right book yet.
Right. Let me help you find one.
Well, why is that not our response in mathematics, right? When kids say, I just don't really like math. Shouldn't our response be, we just haven't found you the right problem yet, you know? And we've, as a society, really put all our eggs in the algebra and geometry basket, right? But we know as a culture, and we affirm in our students that some of them are gonna love poetry, and some of them are gonna like graphic novels, and some of them are gonna love Shakespeare, and some of them are not, and that's okay. That's beautiful, right? Because we're different. But I don't think we have that same sort of mindset in math. Like some of them are going to love geometry, but some of them are going to be more interested in statistics or data science or algebra or not, you know? I mean, there's just so many branches of mathematics that our students don't even get to tap into. And so that's a really big ask for teachers. To me, that's a systems level question.
100%,
But there are little ways we can still bring in those other
And I love that you're still like creating like fun lessons at the high school level.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like fun stops a lot like after elementary.
But it can't, you know, like because
can't.
then it's gonna not feel fun for us as teachers.
Exactly.
And then we're not gonna love our job.
Exactly.
And that's vicious. We know where that ends, right?
Yes.
We know
So
where
much,
that goes.
Yeah. Okay, so do you have any books that you're reading now, like for enjoyment? Like, what are you reading right now?
So we just finished reading the Harry Potter series, me for the second time. We have an 8-year-old son. So we just finished reading all 7. We actually came to Dallas, I don't know, a few weeks ago. They had this like Harry Potter experience from the Wizarding World. So we just finished those with our son a couple weeks ago. But yeah, for fun, I really love to just read like kind of rom-coms if you can, if that's a good genre. But I love audiobooks as well.
Yes,
and
me too.
Interestingly, I like to like listen to nonfiction, but read fiction. I don't know. I've realized that recently. So yeah, I really enjoy it when it's the author. Like a memoir or something.
Yeah,
I love
sure.
listening to that because then I hear the person's voice.
Yes.
And all of those pieces make you a reader, listening to stories, reading the stories.
Snaps.
Yes, absolutely.
How about you, Juan?
And so anytime we're just coming off a big winter break, and so for me, like I always say, like, okay, this is when I'm going to read adult books. Like I'm going to be a grown up.
Right.
Because as a teacher, like I love reading young adult. I love reading picture books because it inspires lessons. And when I know more literature, I always say like I need to build my literacy knowledge. I can make better connections to the work and to the kids that I serve. We love the series in my classroom, The Wild Robot, by Peter Brown.
Yes,
Fantastic novel series. I'm obsessed with it, and it always engages the students. Well, this past semester, what happened was our persuasive writing unit lined up perfectly with the end of the first novel. And so one of my lessons for my students were that they had to write a persuasive letter to me as to why we should read the sequel. And so I was, that was like their big essay for the end as we were finishing off before break. And so then I'm rereading The Wild Robot Escapes so I can kind of, because it's not part of my curriculum, but I have to know it well so I can find ways to connect it to the standards or find it to the connection to the curriculum that I'm responsible for. And so I've just finished rereading that. And then I always love telling my students how many times I've read the novel because I pick up something new every time, a new word, and I have a new life experience, and so I connect to something differently. And so rereading books is a good thing.
Yes. You always discover something new.
Yes,
and different.
absolutely.
I'm guilty of like only reading children's books, so I can say like, okay, you like dogs? All right, read this one. Or you like, okay, if you like this one, you're gonna like this one, so I can recommend what, you know. But I do listen to Audible while I'm like walking my dog. It's like a because we never have like, I don't know, excuses.
You don't have time to yourself.
I have time to scroll on social media, but I don't have time to read. So I listen to my audiobook and I'll go on a walk. I'm like multitasking. Right. Okay, so this is January 2024, and I know a lot of people start the year off by making New Year's resolutions, right? I kind of stopped making resolutions because I know like by like end of January or February I kind of fall off. So instead of a resolution, if you could have maybe a wish, like a wish for maybe all teachers or students for 2024, what would it be, Juan?
My wish for teachers in 2024 would be that we get back to the art of teaching, of just like finding our passion and why we chose to do this profession, and for the systems that we work for to finally realize the value that we are putting into society and just getting us the raise that we all deserve, getting us the support, and just kind of getting back to really honoring this amazing work that we do, that this is why we chose to do it. And so my wish is that we just get back to understanding this big work and helping everybody understand how important it is.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, mine's similar. I think my wish is that teachers recognize like this is really hard work and this is really beautiful work. my wish is that they feel incredibly connected to their students and their colleagues, to their communities, and that on the hard days, they remember that what they do really matters, and that this work it's the long game, you know, and that's sometimes easy to lose sight of. So my wish is that at the end of the year, their students can look back and say, you know, that they grew to become better readers, mathematicians, scientists, historians, better people, and that we as teachers can look back and say, we're better too.
As you're talking, I was thinking of like what my wish would be, and I loved watching your snippets of like the one good thing on your social media, and like what you said too, like to find the beauty in teaching, to find to kind of like rekindle that passion that we had when we first started teaching. If all the teachers can just really get back to loving what they do, not feeling so beat down after so many challenges and hurdles that we had to go through in the past few years, if we could find that passion, if we could find that one good thing every single day,
that's right.
I think that'll just make a huge
save
impact
my career.
in education.
And I think we have to take care of each other.
Absolutely.
You know, like we have to take good care of each other.
Right. Okay, so we have a segment on our podcast called Tag Your It, where listeners write in a question for us to answer. And today's question comes from Ethan C. And his question is, if you could have any superpowers, what would it be and why? I mean, you guys already have many superpowers, but what do you think?
Superpower.
I have always said that I would really love to have the superpower of being able to like read, honestly, and I'm a math teacher, but to be able to read like speed read and have photographic memory through that.
Ooh, that's
you know,
cool.
like read quickly and remember. That would be amazing.
How about you, Juan?
And for me, I think the ultimate superpower would be the ability to fly, right? It's the ultimate power that will bring adventure, will bring the ability to help. So 100% the superpower to fly.
Hey, look, it's Juan up there.
Helping out, guys.
Do you have dreams that you're flying, and you wake up saying that's the superpower I want?
No, I don't think. I don't think I've ever had a dream. It's just in my daydreams. I've had the daydream. What about you? Do you have a superpower?
Oh my gosh, I come up with all these questions, but I don't know how to answer. I think, I used to think if I could read people's minds, like I would love that.
That's not
But
for
then
me.
I don't want that anymore.
No.
I'll be like, oh no, they're thinking like this of me.
Have y'all ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
No.
There was a episode where she was able to read people's minds, and then you saw like the negative aspect, because now you're listening to all these things
Negative thoughts
that aren't for you to know. And so yes, of course we'd love to like live in people's heads, but then when we start picking up on
Many years ago, there was a show called Heroes.
Oh yeah, I watched it.
Yep. That was so scary.
It was real scary.
It started out really
dark.
exciting, and it got scarier and scarier. So I was like, okay, never mind. No superpowers for me.
Yeah.
No, this was so fun. Rebecca and Juan, it was a true honor having you both here on the Schoolyard Podcast today. Thank you for being so positive and making a positive impact on all teachers and all the students across the nation. So thank you so much.
Such a treat. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
We're getting ready to head out to check out the summit to get inspired and celebrate teachers across the U.S. Good luck, Rebecca, during your session. I can't wait to see you on stage. Thank you for joining us for the 13th episode of the Schoolyard Podcast. Remember to pack your curiosity and meet us back in the schoolyard for our next episode. Tag Your It. Now it's your turn to write in with a question, which we will answer here on the Schoolyard Podcast for our segment called Tag Your It. Tag us on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter at School Specialty and hashtag Schoolyard Tag Your It with a question that you want answered. One question will be selected per episode to be answered by our featured guest and myself. If your question is chosen to be answered on the podcast, we will send you a very special Schoolyard Podcast t-shirt. Class dismissed.